So what's your name?
Jenna, hello.
Hi. So I wanted to ask you today, you're selling a lot of gear for the Bernie Sanders campaign here. Of course, he's about to speak behind us at this school. And I wanted to ask you, first of all, why do you support Bernie Sanders?
Because he's everything we need right now. This is it. This is the time to do it. This is the time to elect Bernie. We need to do it this year.
Okay, so obviously a lot of people will say when they see, obviously, you selling T-shirts, pins, that kind of stuff, that's technically capitalism. What do you think? I mean, like, how much are you guys getting taxed, for example, on selling these products?
Okay. So this is a small business. I'm from Florida. I own it with two of my best girlfriends. We're a small business. We travel around. Yes, capitalism is terrible. You know, I watch every Michael Moore documentary, but this is what I have to do to survive. You know, I have student loans. I quit my job as an art teacher because I was only making $12 an hour. Here I am, getting to travel and support Bernie.
Okay, so what do you think would happen if capitalism was completely eradicated?
I'm not sure.
Like, how would people survive? Because you mentioned, like, you needed to survive. How would people?
Well, by electing someone like Bernie, who believes in one for all, healthcare for all, education for all, universal income.
But where would that money come from? Because obviously,
taxes. Right.
Yeah, but those
And
taxes.
I pay them. This is my small business. I pay a lot of taxes. I don't get anything back.
Yeah.
So, you know, I'm doing my part.
Well, I mean, like, a lot of those taxes will come from people who make money at a business that, you know, it's capitalism. So if capitalism's gone, where is that money going to be coming from?
Good question. I don't think it'll ever fade. I don't think pharmaceutical companies will ever stop making money. I don't think banks will ever stop making money. I don't think they'll ever stop being billionaires to tax. That's what we're failing on. We're not doing that.
Well, I know that we see a lot of these T-shirts that are being sold here. A lot of these T-shirts that are being sold here, and, you know, people are willing to give you money for these T-shirts. You're making money off of it, and then you're being taxed on it. But those taxes are going to people like Donald Trump. I mean, is that not kind of somewhat a little bit strange?
Yeah, well, at any job you're paying your taxes, aren't you? Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So you mentioned, that Bernie Sanders would be the person that would make things better if we were to get to a point where we were to eradicate something like capitalism, that he would be. But you mentioned you need to do certain things to survive. Right. How would government really change that?
By giving a shit, by caring at all about us, by not wanting us to die and fail.
Has government ever cared about people?
I don't believe so. Not in any civilization I've heard.
Mm-hmm. So what would change with Bernie Sanders?
No, that's not true. We have a lot of great other countries that Bernie Sanders wants to follow. Sweden, all sorts of Germany, free education, free healthcare. That's what we need. I'm sorry, people are dying.
Mm-hmm. Well, as a Canadian, like I mean, but Sweden is one of the most highest tax countries in the world, and people can't afford to live. I mean, sure, they got a lot of free stuff, but also everyone ends up paying for that through their taxes anyway.
Well, the whole thing, you know, I'm not super educated on how paying taxes, who's getting taxed and what percentage. If you just tax the big banks, we tax the people who need to be taxed more, not us.
What if I were to say that despite the support for Bernie and these politicians that say, you know, we're going to help you out, we're going to give you free things, we're going to care for you, that the answer is you, like as an individual, you are the master to your own successes. You are the one that can bring yourself out of poverty. You can do that, and you could do that by selling products that the public likes.
I'm very privileged because obviously I'm a white female. A lot of people, I come from a good family. I wasn't raised on welfare. I wasn't raised on food stamps. A lot of people are. They don't get to do this. You know, it costs a lot of money to do what I do. This is not cheap. Renting a van, traveling the country, gas, hotels every night. It's not cheap.
Something I hear a lot from people is that one of the biggest things that holds them back from starting a business and finding that privilege themselves is, you know, high taxes, licenses, regulations. Yeah. You know, trying to start a business takes a lot of work. It's not easy to just start up and start selling products on the street and, you know, make money off of it. You have to go through a lot of loopholes. And under Bernie Sanders, I mean, there's going to be more regulations, more taxes.
There is. I know. I get you.
I'm just saying, like, would you consider taxation theft?
Yeah. But not if we're getting something back.
But the key word that you mentioned there,
taking and not giving.
But you mentioned something very important there. You said we get something back. What if the vast majority of people ended up supporting Donald Trump and they raised taxes and told you had to pay into their system, militarism, all the stuff that we don't like about Donald Trump? What if that happened? I mean, isn't it just as fair if people say we want this in like 51% rules of 49%? I mean, that doesn't help anyone.
I know, but look, we don't need to spend more money as on war. The war in Iraq was enough. We don't need this shit again. I'm sorry. Taxing to the right places is what needs to be done. I know we won the popular vote as Democrats. I believe this is what the country is wanting.
Well, okay, I understand what you're saying, and I know that a majority of people want certain things. But my message today is simply that when it comes down to it, we don't have a right over other people who don't want the same thing as us, right? I mean, we can't say, well, I think this idea is so great, it requires force of the government. Yeah. We don't like it when there's Trump, other people don't like it when it's Obama, other people don't like it when it's Bernie or Hillary or whoever it might be. So, how is this any different? My message to you is that I think you are the change you wish to see, and I don't think any government official is ever going to change that for you or anyone. They haven't in thousands of years, and I don't think they're going to start today.
But damn God, isn't Bernie a message of love to me? I think this is a celebration every day when I get to come out here. I think that's what we need, morale.
Well, I really appreciate you having a conversation with us. Not everyone's willing to have a conversation, so I really appreciate that.
Of course.
Thank
you.
All right, sir. What's your name?
Oscar Hilario.
All right. Hi, Oscar. I'm wondering today why you support Bernie Sanders.
Well, I just wanted to participate in the democratic process and hear Bernie speak on Medicare for all, ending the overseas wars, income inequality, things like that.
So you mentioned two things that kind of differ. Obviously, ending the overseas wars. It's bigger. Like there's big government involved in warmongering around the world. Giant military-industrial complex. Sure. Then Medicare for all involves more government. I want to ask you, we have trillions of dollars going into the wars, but where do you think the money is going to come from for something like Medicare?
Well, it's going to come from taxes. We're going to pay a little bit more in taxes and get healthcare versus paying more to the insurance companies.
Mm-hmm. And fair enough, but where do you think that money is going to go to in the healthcare system? Coming from Canada, I have a bit of an insight on where a lot of that money goes. Can you go into that a bit?
As far as where the money's going to go?
Yeah.
Well, you're basically cutting out the middleman and all the high prices we're paying. We're receiving less quality care for more money in this country. We're paying twice as much for pharmaceuticals,
Well, something I hear a lot from Bernie Sanders supporters regards their distaste for big pharma. Obviously, big pharma is a big problem, big monopolies that we see all over the world, especially in the United States. I mean, what if I were to say that a lot of that money that we're being taxed on is going to end up going to these big pharma corporations like we've seen in Canada and these other places, and not like the doctors, the care, the treatment?
That's something interesting, new. I haven't really heard about. Like I said, I'm open to new ideas. If that's something that we're paying for, that's not going towards the medical industry, then I don't agree with it.
So do you believe that taxation is the price we pay to live in a civilized society, for example?
Sure, absolutely. We have everybody criticizes the system now, but we do have socialism for the rich right now. Money. There's 1 in 5 major corporations not paying any taxes. Banks have been getting away with gambling our money away, and who has to pay the cost? The American public do. So
of course the banks are involved in printing money out of thin air for the Fed and all that kind of stuff. That's a huge issue, absolutely. But you mentioned people are they're paying into the system and they criticize that system and it's socialism for the rich. Do you mean kind of like Cuba, where the Castro family was sitting on their throne while people died in the streets?
Well, you can also go to the worst capitalist country in the world too, if you want to look at it that way. That's probably one of the worst examples of the socialism that we're looking for. We're looking for something like the Scandinavian systems, Norway and Sweden and places in Europe, maybe even Canada.
Well, I mean, Norway and Sweden are the most taxed countries in the world. But I wanted to ask you then, what is your definition of capitalism?
Basically a system where the elites are in power. If you want to go full like laissez-faire capitalism, no invisible, the invisible hand, like just go ahead and, you can't keep buying our politicians. That's what I'm against. The politicians we vote into office seem to do the bidding of the elites and big corporations. So
You think that would change under Bernie? Like I've heard a lot of the arguments, like wouldn't he end up with a bullet in his head if he were to really go that far?
wow, I hope not. I hope there's more like him. It seems like he's setting a good example right now for a lot of up and coming politicians. I don't think. I think with his record, he's stayed consistent. If you can listen to his speeches 20 years ago, 30 years ago, and he's saying the same things. It's just now we're starting to feel the crunch, the middle class, and you know what I mean? So.
Like when he said in the 80s that the Soviet Russia was an efficient system that he respected after getting back from Soviet Russia, the trains ran on time, all that kind of stuff. I have to ask, though, you mentioned something that I hear a lot of capitalists actually say, as a matter of fact, that today we don't really see that real form of capitalism, the laissez-faire stuff. We see government intrusion, we see government control of the markets, we see these massive monopolies propped up. And I have to ask, like, how do you think these massive monopolies like McDonald's and Walmart end up becoming so big?
Well, campaign donations. They're buying politicians. I want to see more skewed towards the people that vote these politicians into office versus big business and super PACs owning politicians and not voting the way the majority of America wants to vote. I mean, there's so many popular ideas right now, like I said, Medicare for all, ending the overseas wars, a living wage, all these things most of America is on board with, but our politicians are not trying to make it happen for us.
Well, you mentioned something that's absolutely true, especially considering all these politicians that end up getting donations from a lot of these big corporations. But, I mean, why do you think that these corporations give such big donations to these politicians? Could it have anything to do with, regulating and taxing so that the small businesses get pushed out of the market? Because that is what we see economically from a basic economic level, is that, the more taxation, the more regulations we see on these corporations, McDonald's and Walmart can afford to deal with that. But the small businesses, obviously, they cannot. And then you see robots replacing people at a lot of these places. So does that concern you at all when we hear people like Bernie Sanders talking about more regulations and more taxes on these corporations?
Not necessarily. One of his latest ideas was to, for example, companies like Amazon and Walmart. You have people working for Amazon. Jeff Bezos paid no taxes last year. He's the richest man in the world. And you have people that work for him that get government assistance. Now, his proposal was for those companies to be taxed that money, that whatever the government, the public, the taxpayers are subsidizing for those employees. And I'm on board with that.
Okay, one more thing. I know you have to go, Oscar, but I wanted to ask, do you think that a government could be considered like organized crime? And second, do you think good ideas require force?
To some extent. When things get out of control, I'm sure, but, we don't want an authoritarian, you don't want to see armed guards on every corner. You want to live in a free society for the most part, you know what I mean? There are places and times for that, but through your everyday life, we don't want to see that kind of stuff.
Well, I appreciate the conversation. It's always good to talk with someone that has a nice conversation with us, and thank you very much.
Thank you. What was your name again?
Josh.
Josh. Thank you, Josh.
Thank you.
Like what you see here, OM, don't forget to check the links below. GoFundMe, Patreon. We can't do it without you. Any donation is very much appreciated, especially as we are so heavily demonetized and censored by YouTube as these guys come in and flag all of our content as hate speech. The shadow banning is getting really bad, guys. Also, check our Bitcoin address right here on the screen or in the description below. We really appreciate it. And of course, check us out at the Red Pill Expo 2019. Of course, the great G. Edward Griffin and so many other incredible speakers will be there. Our link for that is below as well. And we cannot forget Mike Maloney's goldsilver.com, which you can also find in the description. One of the greatest market and monetary historians out there. We really encourage everyone to check that out. But until next time, this is Josh Sigurdson signing out from World Alternative Media. Find the truth, be the change.
I'm sure you have already changed people's minds in your young age because you're involved, and I like that.